Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing today? My name is Todd Caputo. I'm the president of Todd Caputo Consulting. I was a car dealer for about 30 years, and I was fortunate enough to sell my stores to Sonic Automotive, publicly traded company, and worked for them for a short time. And I started a small consulting business about a year and a half ago. And used cars are my passion, I would say. I'm very process-oriented, and Paul asked me to speak to something that I work with my clients with, and I wanted to speak about the appraisal process because it's something that is extremely important at a car dealership, as most of you know. But what I found is that I don't think it's taken as seriously as it should be. You know, when you're appraising a car, you're writing a check from, it's the dealer's money, or if you work for a public, it's the shareholders' money, and there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars every single day for an off-street purchase or for a trade-in. But in a lot of cases, the appraisal process, in my opinion, is it's just sloppy in a lot of cases. So what I want to do today is go through some of the things that we probably say are maybe the basics of the business, especially when it comes to appraising a car. But I think that some of these things have been forgotten for a variety of reasons. So that being said, we'll talk about the appraisal process. So the first question I want to ask is, what is your written appraisal process? Do you have an appraisal process in your car dealership? Is it written down? Is it in a playbook? Is it in a workflow? And for those of you that are dealers here, if you have one, would you raise your hand? If you actually have one. David has one. Danny has one. So I would say that if you don't have a written appraisal process, you really should consider maybe taking some of the things that I share with you today and build one in your store. There's a lot of people that have come into the business recently that just, in my opinion, they don't necessarily know the basics when it comes to appraising an automobile, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But it's hard to train people if you don't have actually, a documentation or some kind of manual to teach them to appraise a car. So that's the first thing. I think you have to make the decision to have one. And that's, when we talk about this, I use this graphic here of kind of it's an old school pass-fail that you'd have in a service department from back in the day, an inspection, right? It's important that you have that and you go back to the basics of this. And, doing a physical inspection of a vehicle, regardless of the year, make, model, miles, condition, is extremely important for you as a dealer. And not only that, really for the consumer, because the appraisal part of the sales process, in a lot of cases, if you put yourself in the consumer's shoes, it's a mystery, right? In a lot of cases, it's, okay, I'm gonna have a manager look at your car, give me your keys, they walk back to some guy or girl in an office somewhere, some stranger walks out to your car might get driven around a parking lot or just disappear altogether. And then someone comes back in and eventually you get your keys back and they say, okay, this is what we're going to give you for the car. I don't think that that's really the right way to do it, in my opinion. And I'm going to make some suggestions that you might want to consider at your dealership if it fits your model. So I believe that the consumer, the customer, should be a very integral part of the process when it comes to an appraisal. For a variety of reasons. Some dealers don't believe in it, but I do. And when I had my dealerships, I was very much a proponent for this, and we did this. First of all, number one, it empowers the customer to be a part of the process. The customer feels like they have some control, because for the most part, when they walk into a car dealership, they don't feel like they have control at all, and it gives them a little bit of empowerment. It also helps build rapport and trust between the customer and the sales consultant. Again, people are spending a ton of money to buy or lease a car, whether it's new or pre-owned. And the most part, they're very nervous, and they've got to build rapport and trust with the customer, and I think this helps. It allows the sales consultant also to learn more about, the customer, but, through the condition of the trade. And those of you that have been in the business a while, I think you understand exactly what I'm talking about. You learn a lot about a customer through their trade-in. You see car seats in the back. You might see sporting equipment in the way back. If it's an SUV, you might see a roof rack on it for skis or for bikes or for a canoe. Whether or not they keep the car clean or it's dirty, the exterior condition of the car. You can learn a lot about a customer and ask questions through their trade-in. Also, too, number 4, you know, it's important for F&I products, right? And when you're appraising a car and you learn about the car, you might see things, you know, by the exterior or interior that as a salesperson you can use to maybe suggest some of the F&I products that they're going to hear about at some point during your sales process, and I think that's important too. You know, number 5 allows the customer and the sales consultant to review the positive and negatives of the condition of the trade-in. And I'm not going to say walk out and pick apart the customer's car and devalue it. That's not what I'm saying, but I think an honest assessment cosmetically with the customer and the salesperson is helpful, because in a lot of cases what you'll see is that consumers, they'll point out what's wrong with it, and they may see things that the salesperson maybe did not see. You know, when I was a dealer, we used a tool called Roadster, and it allowed people to take photos of their car for us to give them a firm offer. And I was shocked in a lot of cases at how actually good the photographs were and how honest consumers were in a lot of cases where they actually went out and picked up the defects of the car. And that kind of goes along with number 5 here. You know, people know what they have for the most part as far as a trade. So again, I believe and I preach to the dealers that I work with, and I suggest that it's done by the salesperson with the consumer together. So again, some of this may seem basic, but you know, a general walk around of the car is extremely important by both parties. And you're going to be looking at, you know, the fenders, the door panels, the quarter panels, the roof, the trunk, the hood, the bed of the truck if it's a pickup truck, the tailgate, the convertible top if it's applicable. And photographs need to be taken. And unfortunately, I haven't seen a really good piece of software out there that actually does a basic appraisal. There are tools out there that allow photographs to be uploaded, but it almost is, I don't want to say too complicated, but it doesn't really walk the salesperson and the customer through it step by step necessarily like it should. So I'm hoping at some point there is a vendor out there that maybe builds a tool that can basically almost be like an appraisal for dummies, we can call it, where you walk the customer and the salesperson through the appraisal process, looking at these items that I'm going to give up, you know, that I'm going to talk about. And you'll notice at the bottom here, all vehicles, regardless of condition, year, and miles, should have these items inspected. And I was guilty of this when I used to put numbers on cars when I had dealerships, and my managers were too, and I see it happen now when I work with stores. We'll walk out to a car, and if it's got 150 or 200,000 miles on it, and you know it's a wholesale car, and you're going to put $500 in it, or $100 in it, or $1,000 in it, you might just walk around it and not even get in it, or start it or do anything else because it's frankly junk, right? Or you might have a late model, low mileage car that only has 5,000 miles on it with the balance of the factory warranty. You might do the same thing. I would suggest to you to break that habit completely. Every car should be inspected the same way every single time for a variety of reasons. So when we talk about these things, again, a lot of this is going to seem basic, but there are some people that have come into the business the last few years that have only bought cars virtually at auctions and never physically gone to a sale, or just they don't really know how to appraise a car. That's kind of why I built this presentation. So again, some of this may seem basic. We could talk about, you know, scratches, dents, door dings, rust, pitted or faded paint, hail damage. It's important for you to teach the people in your dealership what these things actually are and what they mean. You know, some of the best of the best, they'll define a scratch as something you put your fingernail in and your nail stays in there and it won't rub out. Or they'll say a scratch has to be, certain inches long. It could be 3-4 inches long or regardless. Or rust, right? Is it rust straight through? Or is it, pitted or faded paint? What does that exactly mean? Some people don't know. And hail damage is hail damage, but in a lot of cases, sometimes you don't see it. You could have two people look at a car and people are going to see things differently. People just perceive things differently. So it always helps to have a couple different sets of eyes on a car. Evidence of previous paint repair is extremely important. Not everything shows up on Carfax or AutoCheck, especially when the work was done and when it's actually reported. People have to know, or appraising a car, what previous paint work actually means. What orange peel means, like those of us that are in the business know what orange peel means, but some people don't. Fish eyes paint, same thing, right? Like some people even don't know what a fisheye is. Discoloration, paint mismatch, overspray for paint repairs or paint oxidation. And again, I suggest if you want to go to this extent, use a paint meter if you want to. Some customers might not understand it, some do, but if you want to go to that extreme, I mean, when people go to an auction and buy a car, they use paint meters. Why would you necessarily consider using one in your dealership? Convertible tops, it's important. You got to make sure that they work, regardless of the year, the age of the car. It's a power top. It's got to go up. It's got to go down properly. When you push the button, a lot of roller converters don't do that. Rips and tears, excessive wear. Trunk beds, dents, holes, tailgates. The tailgates open and close it properly too in a lot of cases. Sometimes people put bed liners in trucks to cover things up. And I'm not saying remove a bed liner out of the car, but look for holes in the bed liner if there's a fifth wheel in there. And the windshield too, right? All these things cost money. So if a windshield has scratches or cracks or imperfections that can't be repaired, it affects the value of the car. And again, not trying to devalue the car, but if a customer is trading in a vehicle, it's going to be worth a certain amount of money, but it's going to cost money to recondition it. That's why it's important to point these things out and do it with the customer, so it's not a mystery. The interior, again, extremely, extremely important. That's why I say every car, every time, get the inspection done the same way. Let's talk about odors first. Cigarette smoke, cigar smoke, marijuana smoke. It's extremely difficult to get rid of that smoke in a car. And those of you that are in the industry and understand this know that a car that's a smoker is not worth a car that's a non-smoker. It's just not. It's impossible in a lot of cases to get these odors out. Making sure the power seats work, all of them, the lumbar control, the cleanliness of the interior, scratches, tears, burn holes, fading, cracking on all components, and headliners, dashes, steering column, radio screens, a shifter column, cup holders, interior glass. It's important. This stuff, again, affects the value of the car, whether it's retail disposition or it's wholesale disposition. Minivans and SUVs, make sure all the power seats work properly in the rear. Some of them have folding seats. When you press a button, the seat folds up and somebody gets into the back. If that's broken, it's expensive. Make sure the power sliding doors work. Sometimes they just don't work anymore. Again, even if it's a 150,000 mile Toyota Sienna, if the power sliding door doesn't work, it costs money to fix it, whether or not it's going to go to the auction or not. Inspecting the sunroof and the moonroof, making sure that actually they do work. Sometimes they don't, especially on older cars. Rear entertainment systems, again, if the rear entertainment system doesn't work, it's expensive to fix. And again, it might seem simple, but how many keys do you have, Mrs. Jones? Because keys are not expensive, or not inexpensive at all anymore. They're very, very expensive, as we all know, regardless of whether it's a retail car or a wholesale car. Because if you have a car at the auction, whether it's you're selling it online or you're selling it at a physical auction, having 2 keys is a better value than having 1 key. Then let's talk about tires and the mechanical part of this. Tires are really, really important. And again, regardless of whether or not it's a retail car or a wholesale car, it's extremely important. And again, I advocate that the salesperson is involved with the customer when it comes to inspecting the tires and the rims as well. This may take more time, but I think it's time well spent. Again, I'm from upstate New York originally. Seeing rips like this is very, very common, right? Because the salt just destroys the wheels on these cars. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a tire gauge that's digital like that to actually go out and measure the tire depths in the car, then taking a photo of that and uploading it into your software that you're using to put a value on the car. People are trading their cars in for a reason. We know that, right? They probably were quoted $900 for a set of tires. So, again, if the car needs 4 tires, it affects the value of the car. And, again, it's important to document these damages that I just talked about with the consumer and making sure that your people understand that these photos need to be taken for a variety of reasons. Take pictures of the hail, take pictures of tears, take pictures of paint, take pictures of dings and dents. And when you're building your appraisal process in your store, use examples like this to teach people, especially people that are new in the business, what these things mean and what they are when you're training them. And then I also suggest too that take photos of the car, especially if it's something that you want to retail or even that you want to wholesale. certain angles every single time. And this is where I think some of the software is lacking, because there's not a walkthrough or a step-by-step process that I know of in a piece of software for appraisals that walks you through taking a picture of the front, the driver's side, the passenger side, and the rear, the dashboard, and the damage, and the tire condition. We kind of know to do it, you have to teach people to do it, but there isn't a step-by-step process to walk the consumer through this with the salesperson. You know, AccuTrade allows you to do it, but it doesn't say step 1, take this picture, step 2, step 3, step 4. And also too, what we did at my dealerships and some of the dealerships that I work with, you know, what we'll do, especially if it's a car that's going to get retail, we'll use the photos from the appraisal to have those photos online before the car actually gets to the front line. Because having photos of a car online is a lot better than having a stock photo. So I would advocate that you can use some of these photos if they're good to have on your website prior to actually putting the car on the front line. Because again, I think having, you know, 10 or 12 photos is better than having just one stock photo. And you know, you want to be able to build something for your people to learn from. So when you build your manual, you build your appraisal process, basically go step by step with your software to teach your people how to actually do this. This is the auto that I have up here on the screen that those are familiar with, but when you're going to build your guide, literally show people, you know, step 1 is hit the plus button, step 2 is the VIT scanner, step 3 is taking photos of the car, and so on. I think it's important. You know, I hate to use this word for dummies, but when you're building things like this, you have to kind of really kind of dumb it down and make it simple in order for people to learn it and understand it and to make it scalable. So again, this is just some more examples of if you were going to build this in your store, how you could build this out, screenshots from the app or whatever software that you use. And again, here's just some more examples of what I suggest you do. And last but not least, save it, right? After there's photos in there. And then notes, comments, etc. Damaged left front door, right rear door scraped up bad. And then we go to the mechanical part. I believe that the mechanical part is as much or more important than the cosmetic part, but the mechanical part needs to be done by a used car manager, sales manager, desk manager, general manager, wherever you call that person in your dealership. This is something that's extremely important as well, that I believe in a lot of cases gets neglected because of a variety of reasons. I mean, I think we've gotten lazy in the industry the last few years because used car prices have not done this, they've done this or gone up. So the mechanical part of this has gotten really sloppy as well. So again, these are just some tips that I would offer you to suggest to your people. You know, first of all, the car's got to get driven. It can't just be one of these things where you just start it up, put gear, making sure the air blow's cold and turning it off, or driving it around the parking lot for like 30 seconds. Car's got to get out on the road, it's got to be driven. You know, looking at lights on the dash is extremely important. You know, there's tools out there from like AccuTrade, for example, for the OBD2, which I strongly advocate using. There's other vendors that use it as well. Lights on the dash are important and they affect the value of the car, we all know that, right? But driving the car for a couple of miles, getting it up to 65 miles an hour, making up a minimum of 3 left turns and 3 right turns. Those are best practices, and there should be a set route for your management team to take, just like you have a set route in a lot of cases for a road test for a customer when they want to test drive a car. I would advocate you have the same thing in your dealerships. Looking at the lights on the dash, making sure the brakes actually work correctly. You can't make sure brakes work properly just by driving a car around a parking lot or not even put it in gear. Transmission, making sure it shifts properly. I mean, we don't have 3-speed transmissions and 4-speed automatic transmissions anymore. We have 8 speeds, we have 9 speeds, we have 10 speeds. You got to get the cars to all the gears. It's extremely important. Make sure the heat and air conditioning work. 4-wheel drive, 4-wheel high, 4-wheel low. Tires in alignment, making sure we let go of the wheel at 65 miles an hour, and the car is going like this and just veer off to the side of the road. You know, things like that. Again, lights seem basic, but are important. If you got to hop in a tire at 50 miles an hour, then you know there's either a rim that's bent or a tire that's out of balance. And again, when you bring this into your shop, it's going to cost money in your service department to get these things fixed, and the appraisal should reflect that. Verify again. the power moonroof works. Verify if the cruise control works properly. I put adaptive cruise control here. More cars are coming out now with adaptive cruise control. You gotta make sure that it actually works. It's electronic, there's cameras that are being used. If it doesn't work, it's expensive to fix. Heated and cooled seats, making sure that they actually work. If the car is heads-up display, making sure that that works. Again, it's not a cheap fix. Now I want to talk more about tracking the appraisal process properly. And I've got screenshots here from vAuto, and I just want to go through some basics here that I think are really important and kind of the why to each one of these things. So first of all, the source, right? Tracking the source is extremely, extremely important, so you know exactly what your look-to-book is by source. So again, in vAuto, it's down here on the left-hand side. You can set this up yourself or have vAuto set it up for you, or whoever you use for an appraisal tool, but that has to be marked every single time by who's actually appraising the car. You'd be surprised at how many times it's not. Either it's blank or they just pick the first choice that comes up. But if I'm spending money in marketing and advertising and trying to drive people in the door, or I'm paying somebody in the service lane to try to buy cars out of the service lane all day long, I'm spending money in marketing for street purchases, I need to be able to track this, and how I can do it is here through the appraisal tool, and I want to know what my look-to-book is. If I'm spending $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year for somebody to work the service lane, I need to make sure I'm getting return on investment. I don't know unless I'm tracking it. So having the source indicated every single time is extremely important. Tracking the salesperson too, right? Like tracking look-to-book by salesperson and the manager. And again, you'd be surprised how often you see salesperson blank. It's just blank for some reason. Either they haven't chosen it when they're doing the appraisal, or something wasn't set up properly with your integration between your CRM and whatever appraisal tool that you're using. Most of the time, if things have been set up properly, you have the proper integration set up, which you should be able to, especially now in 2023, most of this stuff should be populated already if the customer is entered in the CRM. It should push automatically into your appraisal tool. And again, right, we need to know who the salesperson is for a variety of reasons. We need to know the customer's name. It's not just Rick, right? Who is it? It's Rick, their last name, where they live, their email address, all information that hopefully was gathered properly in the CRM before the appraisal was even done. Because a car really shouldn't be appraised until we have a lot of this information from the consumer already. So this is blank for a reason. They either didn't have the customer in the CRM, or there's something broken between the CRM and your appraisal tool, or it wasn't set up. Indicating the correct disposition, whether or not it's retail or wholesale, is extremely important. In most appraisal tools, by default, it's set up for retail, but if it's wholesale, it needs to be indicated. It's extremely important that you correct and you actually input the right disposition, because it's going to affect the value that you're going to put on the car as to what it's worth. And again, I see it happen all the time. You'll see cars in here that a dealer put $500 in, you know they're going to wholesale, but it's set retail disposition. And then the accurate reconditioning estimate. This is really important. And I would tell you that the dealers out there that are probably the best of the best, everybody has this default number trying to set up a reconditioning to start in whether it's vAuto or VinQ or any of the other software packages out there, but they don't, in a lot of cases, actually look at the car and say, wait a minute, it's not going to be $2,300, it's going to be $800, it's going to be $1,200, or it's only going to be a couple $100 because it's a late model car, or it's going to be $5,000, because what the best dealers do is they will build a spreadsheet and look at data and use the reconditioning amount that was estimated when they actually did the appraisal versus what was actually done in their service department, and they'll measure it by the appraiser. That's extremely important, because as we all know, if you overestimate or underestimate the reconditioning on a car, it can make or break a deal. You could make the wrong deal, you can make the right deal, you could put too much in a car, or you could not put too much in a car and actually lose a deal. Does that make sense? So it's extremely important not only to do it, but if you want to be like the best of the best in the country, measure it. I'm guessing you probably measure it. Photographs, like we talked about before. Every single time, there's got to be photographs of just the basics of the car, of the angles that I showed in the previous slide, but not only that, but the damage is extremely important. and notes. We all know that just because someone comes in to buy a car on a Tuesday, they may not walk out with a car on Tuesday. They might come back on Friday. They might come back next week. They might come back next month. They might have ordered a car because you didn't have it in stock because of the supply issues that we're having. The more photographs you have, the better. The more notes you have, the better, because there might be somebody else working the deal other than the person that initially appraised the car. So the more notes that are in here, the better. If you have a used car director in your organization, if you have a dealer who's looking at his or her appraisals on a daily basis, having all this information here is extremely important. If you're someone who's going to decide in the company whether or not the car is going to get retailed or wholesale, or where you're going to price the car, having more pictures like this is extremely important. So again, I would advocate photos, and the more notes, the better. I would rather have more pictures and more notes rather than not having any or very little at all. It's extremely important. And then let's talk about wholesale disposition, especially in the market that we're in right now. To me, in my opinion, a car is only worth wholesale is what it's literally going to be able to sell for at the auction, right? Like, what's the car going to cash for? I don't think the cost to market matters. I don't think the price to market matters. If it's a $1,000 car or $2,000 car that's going to go to the auction, it really is, all that matters to me is auction data. And really probably from the last couple of weeks, especially in the market that we're seeing now, where older cars are continuing to decline like they used to, especially at this time of year. So I would say whoever's putting numbers on trades, especially if they're going to be wholesale vehicles, they indicate that it's wholesale disposition, and then they use your tool that you have to put numbers on cars and make sure that they look at the CR and kind of match it up, right? Is this a car a 3.8? Is it a 5.0? Is it a 1.0 because it's junk, right? Like, it makes a difference, because you don't want to put too much money in a car that you're going to wholesale, or you don't want to maybe miss a deal and not put enough in it. And obviously too, I think it's important, the title. You can't sell a car at the auction without a title. You can sell it, but you can't get paid. If you can't get paid, it doesn't matter. If you can't produce a title in 30 days, you own the car and you're going to sell it all over again, and chances are 30 days it's worth less. So, you know, then let's talk about the future, and then we'll conclude, and then I'd like to do a little Q&A with everybody. The future is coming, you know, very, very quickly with a lot of things. Let's talk about self-driving first. It's coming, and there's different levels of self-driving. If you're appraising a vehicle and it has self-driving features, you need to know what level that it is, because it affects the value. You need to know if that level of self-driving goes with the car, or when they trade it in, if does it no longer have that self-driving capabilities anymore, like on Teslas or other cars. It's extremely important. Subscription options, again, that's coming. You might be appraising a car in Massachusetts that presses a button and you have heated seats because they're trading in December or January, but that might turn off in May when the subscription's done. It's coming, right? Not here now, but this is coming sooner rather than later. So it's important when a car is being appraised that you find out what level of self-driving that it has, what subscriptions options it may or may not have. And then last but not least, we've been talking a lot about EVs. You know, what's the battery life? How do we know? I think it's still kind of a mystery at this point. There are some companies out there that are providing some Carfax-like data to battery life, but I think that is, again, going to be a factor as to what, you know, especially what EVs are worth. That's all I've got. I hope this was helpful to you. Do we have questions, comments, anything I missed? I try to catch it all, but you know, it's the car business, right? It's ever changing. Yeah, go ahead.
Todd, what do you think is a benchmark for the delta between estimated recon and actual recon?
And it's a hard question to answer. I don't know. I think you should probably be realistically within a couple $100 either way. I think if you're within a couple $100 either way, you're probably doing a relatively good job, because I don't think a couple $100 is going to make or break a deal, whether you put too much in a car or not enough. But I think that's a great question. But the most important thing is, again, you got to measure it. Most dealers don't measure it like it should be measured. David, do you measure it? So David is probably one of the best of the best, David Long. You don't mind sharing how you do it if you don't mind? You know, Mike?
Yeah, we have any side. So we have a guy from Czech Republic that grabs all the information out of our appraisals and every finalized appraisal relative to same finalized appraisal, matches up to repair orders. It just creates the Delta report. It's called a Delta report, but it's never been 300 or 200, so we're not that good. It's a lot more. Between 500 to 800 and on store.
Yeah. Yep, really. Yeah. Gotcha.
Great question, thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Come on. Nobody's got anything?
We go ahead. If you're, I know you mentioned best practice appraise all vehicles the same about so the your make model or technician. So if you were to follow all of the steps in your benchmark process, do you know about how long that would take to more than appraisal in this invoice?
I'd say 30 minutes, realistically. Between the cosmetic and the mechanical part, probably about 30 minutes. And a lot of people say, geez, I want to get my customers in and out in an hour. This is the most important part. I mean, some car, if you got a low mileage car, I don't think it's going to take quite as long. But I mean, most of the cars that are coming in on trade in a lot of cases are older, higher mileage cars. And, in this day and age, most of those cars are going to get probably retailed at the dealership because most dealers aren't wholesaling cars like that anymore. So I would tell you that I believe it's time well spent, but I think 30 minutes, give or take. And I think too, customers appreciate it. I think they appreciate it. I think, the car buying for a lot of people is such a mystery, and they're so scared and they're so nervous. But when you have them be a part of the process, I think the time goes by faster. I would rather spend a half hour, at least part of that half hour, whether it's 15 or 20 minutes, with the customer actually being a part of it. They're actually walking outside, or inside, depending on where you do it, because I think the time will go by faster. And I don't think they're going to mind spending the time doing that, rather than just sitting at a desk where there's a salesperson walking back and forth 5 times, to a desk manager working a deal. Because we all know what happens when they sit at the desk or walk and get on the phones and they start talking to people, they start shopping somewhere else. So I guess 30 minutes. Great question.
I have a question about process. So confidence. When a salesperson is doing an appraisal, how much information is too much information to then share back to the consumer? What do you imagine is the most important signals? Is it Kelly Blue Book offer? Because I feel like some of the more and more customers in the back of their mind are thinking, I'm just going to go somewhere else and also get a backed offer, competing offer, whatever. And so I'm always thinking about what confidence do I need to translate to the consumer, and do I arm the salesperson with all that, or is it managers?
As far as the value of the car?
Yeah.
I didn't focus on the actual value of the car in this presentation when I built it, because I think everybody in their dealership and their businesses, they have an idea of what they want their cost to market to be based on day supply, condition, color, and disposition. This presentation really was more about the actual process itself and not the actual number. But this process obviously has an effect on what the number's going to be. I believe this, in your retail, most people have a very good idea of what their car is already worth before they walk into the dealership. They already know. Most of the time they probably already checked. They might have an offer from CarMax or Carvana or Vroom, where they don't actually have the photograph. But again, I think that when you build trust by having them involved in really being a part of this process, and I think it allows you to have more of a reality conversation with the customer, especially with a customer that wants too much for their trade. Does that make sense? And also, too, in a lot of cases, someone that walks in and they've already got 3 numbers from other dealers on the value, I'll guarantee you that no one's actually, and they may have gotten those numbers through an online tool, so that's kind of what they think it's worth. They haven't actually gone through this process of having the car actually inspected, and I think it gives them a better understanding of the value they've actually given them. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have 2 things, Todd. One, just a strange comment. I traded a car a long time ago that was the most gorgeous car you've ever seen in your life, and you couldn't sit in it. Smoke was so bad. And don't laugh, I called the local fire department, and don't laugh. they say, we're going to sell you something, and you put it in the car and you run the car for about a half an hour. And the car smelled good, and I hate cigarette smoke more than anybody in this damn room. The second question is just out of a morbid curiosity. Considering how desperately we need used cars and the show be, as the long will tell you, be at buying car centers, how many dealerships do you see that actually have a process in place that's consistent? Because I can tell you, I keep getting richer and richer because every place I go that does training, the training is so inconsistent. They say we're probably going to meet you back in 3 months, and I just smile and shake my head. How many dealerships do you actually go into that honor the fact that they have to be consistent? Because if you got 10 processes, you have no damn process.
I haven't found a dealership yet that I've worked with, you know, quote unquote, as a consultant that goes through this process and does it consistently.
Okay, good. Now I know you're honest.
Yeah, I mean, I just haven't. Now, when I worked with Sonic, after they bought my businesses, they do centralized appraisals. The managers can put a number on a car, but you know, Sonic and a lot of the others, they have a process where, you know, someone walks around the car with an iPad and they take pictures, and then there are people in an office somewhere that put numbers on the car. So I would tell you, most of the other publics do too. They're probably better at it, but it's still not actually sitting in the car, driving the car, smelling the inside of the car like you talked about. So I would tell you most aren't very good. That's why I'm very passionate about this presentation. There's a lot of things I work with dealers on, but I think that this is probably one of the most important things because you're talking about a ton of money here, right? A ton of money. That's just checks that initially get written for a car, whether it's traded or it's purchased, but then ultimately what happens with the car, whether it's retail or wholesale for profit or loss.
Yeah, and you don't want to lie to yourself. There's nobody to correct.
Well, no, I mean, I don't see it. And it's hard to get people that have been doing this for a long time to change their habits. It really is. But again, I think when you show them the why these things are so important, it's helpful. And that's what I try to do when I work with dealers and managers that work at stores, or when I speak like this, right? You know, why is this so important? Why is it important to get back to the basics? And we all know in this day and age, there's been a lot of bad habits developed, especially over the last 2.5 or 3 years because of COVID. I mean, COVID first started, you couldn't even get inside a car. You had to wear gloves, you got to spray it down, and it was insane. So I think some of those really best practices when it came to appraisals were gone. And then for the people out there that are buying cars at the auctions were closed completely, and then they were online only. Again, the same thing, relying on a condition report, which typically isn't correct and done properly, and you're buying a car sight unseen. So I think 2024 is really going to be, I thought it was going to be 2023, but it hasn't quite hit yet, but I think next year especially is really going to be a time to get back to the basics of the business, and this is one of the most important ones. Anybody else?
2 questions.
Sure.
I mean, like the look-to-book percentage, assuming that all appraisals are finalized.
Yeah.
And trading. What do you see as being the correct look-to-book percentage if all appraisals are finalized? And what do you think trade efficiency percentage should be?
I think it depends on a couple things. And David, that's a great question. So realistically, most of the stores that I work with are like between 30 and 40%, but they need to be probably double that. I think if you can get 6 out of 10, you're probably doing a really good job when it comes to look to book. But what I like to do with dealers when it comes to look to book and missed trades, what we do is most managers have got 2 or 3 monitors at their desk, and what I advocate that is done is that you pull your missed trade report up on one screen, and then you pull your CRM up in another, and you go car by car, and you look at the actual appraisal, see the number that was put on the car, look to see where it went, and then you go into the CRM, and you actually take a look at the notes and the follow-up that was either done or not done properly, and you'd be surprised, and sometimes what you see, you learn a lot, not just about what you're putting in a trade or not putting enough in a trade, but how your follow-up processes are in your store. So I hope that answered your question. Yeah, I think that's what I advocate that we do, and what I try to teach people. And it's a great lesson because you find out in a lot of cases, geez, they're not putting notes in the CRM like they're supposed to, or, you know, that customer said they were gonna buy a car in a couple of months. Well, they just bought a car down the street, they bought it 2 days later. Why? You can't always blame a salesperson or a manager if you didn't have the car. In a lot of cases, that's affected look-to-book because supply's been so short, people are just gonna go where they can actually get the car, regardless. So if you didn't have the car, it's not necessarily your fault, and it's really hard to deal a trade for a new car. But if you missed a deal on something you had in stock, there's a reason why you missed it, right? Something got missed in your store, and looking at notes in CRM and looking at the follow-up that was either done or not done, I think really teaches people a good lesson.